Welcome to Focus Today. I'm delighted to have in the studio with us a good friend and colleague, Dr. Rick Booye is with us today. We don't use the PhD stuff much, but he has an earned doctorate, and congratulations.
Thank you.
And he's also pastor of Trail Christian Fellowship, and I wanted him to come in today, and every once in a while he keeps us theologically pure, straight. You know, he's kind of like my theological coach. But anyway, we visited Trail on Good Friday. Enjoyed your service immensely.
Thank you.
But your sermon just really struck me in so many ways, because it was Good Friday. You were talking about the crucifixion, and in particular the evil that was behind it, and the subject of evil. And you know what's so interesting about that is that we have tried to soften the term evil. And I realize it can be a negative, and I don't want that to be, but I think sometimes Christians have a hard time calling evil evil. Mm-hmm. And we got to be careful, because sometimes the term evil is just used in a flippant way. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, that person's evil. Well, you know, you may not want to say that when they're really not. So help us with this, Coach. And because you brought out a very interesting thing on your sermon, and that was, it was evil what they did to Christ.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it had to be, because evil is actually the result of sin, which is a much deeper concept than evil. Though we use the term evil in our culture, it has some meaning, has some traction. The term sin in the broader culture has lost a lot of its traction, and so the term evil means something to people. We have to realize as Christians that sin, which is when we were separated from God in our moral, ethical, physical reality, created the evil that we experience in our world. Well, healing that is what Christ did at the cross. So he had to actually absorb and completely face the evil, all of the evil in our world. I mean, he literally had, so to speak, had to experience all of it. The worst that humanity can do, moral evil.
Right.
And the wrath of God.
Wow. For
the moral evil. So, you know, when you're talking about the crucifixion of Christ, you're talking about the complete destruction of evil itself for all of eternity, the beginning of the destruction of it.
Wow.
So when evil is really at the heart of everything that's going on. Because
what we don't hear that part. What we hear is that Christ was crucified to pay the penalty of sin.
Yes.
And that's true. But the evil behind that is something we don't recognize.
Yeah, I know. You know, it's interesting, because the gospel of Christ is the only message on earth that actually faces evil and deals with it personally and eternally. The rest of the messages that you hear philosophically, whether they tend towards the spiritistic or the Eastern view of things, or whether they're naturalistic, they either deny evil or they make you work it off.
Yes.
Through karma or whatever. Only the gospel actually faces it straightforwardly and heals it completely for all of eternity. And when you realize what Jesus had to do at the cross, he couldn't just do part of it. We'd like to see him, well, Lord, I'd like you to avenge that particular evil right over there because it happened to me, you know.
Yeah, right.
He couldn't do that. He wouldn't do that. He has to deal with all of it. And he has to deal with it in time and space, because evil really happens in time and space. Sin and evil take place in time and space.
Right.
He couldn't do it just theoretically, because evil is personal. It's not just a concept. It's something you experience. He had to experience it. So when we talk as Christians, we really do need to bring up the subject of evil, I think. You know, if you're saying, well, how can I share Christ with people? I think one of the very best ways is to say, what do you think about the evil in the world?
Yeah.
Because, you know, because honest and truly, the gospel's the only real answer to the evil. Christianity is the only religion on earth, if you want to call it a religion or put it in that category, where there is a suffering God who actually experiences the personal victimization voluntarily of the evil. There's no other message like that. So I think Christians need to think about evil. I think they need to think about the sin that causes it, and they need to embrace the fact that this is an evil age. Paul calls it an evil age in Galatians 1.
Right.
And it does, you say, well, that's kind of depressing. It is at first, but it's very realistic.
All right. Boy, this just opens up so much. What's so interesting about this, would you categorize scourging and crucifixion as evil acts?
Oh, of course.
Okay.
They were evil.
Because we look at them as, well, that's what they did in those days to people that disagreed with them. But it's an evil act.
Well, of course it is. And what made it evil was not simply the brutality of it. What made it evil was that it was perpetrated against a completely innocent person. The evil itself was because this incredible pain was inflicted on a person, the only human being ever to live who didn't deserve any kind of pain.
Right.
So, there's a couple of levels of evil there.
All right, so evil is a result of sin. All right, now, how would you look at the evil in the world? I mean, people are doing evil things to one another, and they're doing it in the name of religion.
Oh, absolutely they are. But it's not the fault necessarily of religion, it's the fault of the human. See, the Bible teaches that the human being is actually fallen and wants to do evil, finds excuses for it. Well, all the religions except the gospel can, and even the gospel, if it's misunderstood, can be used by human selfishness to perpetrate evil on other people. I mean, people are surprised if I agree with them. They say, well, religion has caused a lot of evil in the world. I agree. It certainly has. However, the gospel, where you have a suffering God who died for his enemies, people who understand that really are converted, who really are converted, will not perpetrate that kind of evil. They may claim to be Christians, but the gospel itself doesn't victimize people. Religion can, but it's because human beings, ever since the fall, basically hurt one another. I mean, unbelievable ways. Moral evil in our world is absolutely overwhelming. We just don't want to look at it. We're in a state of, especially in the West, a lot of us are sort of in a state of denial about how evil the human condition is.
Right. I don't think we recognize how. I mean, we can go back to crucifixions. We can go back to the Nazi concentration camps.
Oh yeah.
I mean, those are evil things. One human being perpetrating on another, and you think, well, those are evil things, and we kind of dismiss them. But that evil does exist in the heart of man. And you know what's interesting to me is, when you look at some of the statistics out there, Rick, the things that Christians are suffering with, it appears that they're evil. I mean, Christians suffering with these thoughts and these actions.
Of course. We live in a fallen age. Jesus said, you're going to suffer in this age. Yeah. He suffered for us, not so that we wouldn't suffer, but so that when we suffer, we'll become more like him.
Right.
So
it's called the fellowship of suffering.
It is the fellowship of his suffering. See, this is the Ecclesiastes view of life. It really is. You have to dim the lights of this age in order to realize how bright the next age is. This age is an evil age. Jesus was so realistic about it. This is why Christianity is so wonderful. That's why the gospel is so wonderful. It faces the evil. It tells us not to over-expect with regard to this age.
Right.
Because if you put all of your hope in this age, it will completely disappoint you and will become an idol to you and eventually kill you. If you put your hope in Christ and you realize this is an evil age, the goodness that we experience, and there's a lot that we do experience that's good, that's grace. But the age itself is an age of suffering. So when Christians suffer, it's not a weird, odd thing, no matter what the suffering is. We live in a suffering age. And Jesus was very clear about this. And yet it's not hopeless. This is very hopeful, because no other philosophy has the hope of the resurrection.
Right.
See?
Right.
Our hope isn't in this age. It's in the next age. So we can admit that this age is evil while we're trying to make it as good as we can. And we're seeking to be agents of peace and healing in our world, but realizing our ability to create peace and healing isn't the salvation of the world. Christ is.
How dangerous it is for Christians to involve themselves, maybe unwaringly, in acts of evil, say, go to war.
Well, there is such a thing as just war.
Right.
There's a whole literature on the subject.
Right.
But Christians easily, in my opinion, I've been a pastor for 35 years, I've watched Christians do evil things to the extent that they are not thinking like Jesus about the circumstances they're facing.
Right.
And we tend to reach for the closest mental categories that we can find. And if we spend a lot of time watching TV, we spend a lot of time paying attention to our culture, then the mental categories for dealing with trauma tend to be the ones the culture uses.
Right.
Well, those usually are anger and violence of some sort.
Right.
And very rarely are those tools that got, in fact, James says the wrath of man simply does not accomplish the righteousness of God. So when Christians reach for the wrong coping mechanisms, they can and do evil. And this is wrong. This is how the Holy Spirit, he corrects them and he works with them. But we do it. We all goof up.
All right. Pastor Rick Booye is with us today. We're talking about the subject of evil. You can tell it's quite complex. And when we come back, I'm going to ask him the question, can you be healed from it? We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paulina, and I work at theDove TV. Did you know that when you support theDove TV, you have a profound impact, not only in our community, but around the world? It's your continued support that takes the inspiration and hope in the programs we produce and makes them available to the thousands of people who are watching these videos online every week. Help bring encouragement and hope to our valley and beyond by making a secure online donation today at our website, thedove.us.
Okay, we're back, and our guest in the studio today, our good friend Pastor Rick Booye, pastor of Trail Christian Fellowship, and just one of the warriors of the faith. And we're talking about evil, and it's a huge topic, very, very complex. And you've mentioned several times already, Rick, that Christians can get involved in it and do it. I mean, it could be mental abuse, could be physical abuse, all this time while they're sitting in a pew.
Oh, sure.
You know, and so unless we understand what evil is, sometimes we accept it.
Yeah. Well, we are people of our age.
Right.
The Bible's very clear that even though we are Christians, we still are sinners saved by grace. So there is this aspect to us that if we listen to it, if we listen too much to the world around us, what Paul calls the flesh will produce real destruction and real evil. We will do that sort of thing. We shouldn't.
We're having a hard time responding to evil in our culture. We don't know what, if it is evil, or is our silence to some of this evil somewhat a condonment, and yet there are groups and organizations that speak out against it. It seems to be kind of messy in that area.
Well, it is messy, and you're talking about tens of millions of people, and whenever you've got huge numbers of people responding to any sort of crisis, you're going to get, it depends on which group you're talking to, how they're responding. Among Christians, you tend to find either folks who want to not admit that the evil is as bad as it is. There's a lot of compromise, perhaps, and not really seeing it from God's perspective. On the other hand, there are other groups that respond. They actually try to fight evil with evil, you might say. In other words, they adopt
harsh responses.
Very harsh responses, much more harsh than the Lord Jesus himself.
Right.
It seems to me that in between those two is a third completely different option, and that is to be faithfully present. That means in an evil culture. Do not worship the culture. Don't think of it as a good culture. It's not. And yet at the same time, be present there as a redemptive presence, both as the body of Christ and as individuals, so that you're responding and saying, yeah, that is evil. But I don't hate the people, I hate the evil. And I'm going to try and bring them to Christ, because that's the only way a person can ever be healed of evil.
All right, the big one is, it appears that the Islamic faith, and I want to be careful here, it's sensitive, but their acts appear to be evil.
Well, human beings will find reasons to do that which meets their personal desires.
Right.
And if they have moral or philosophical or religious permission,
Oh.
then they will actually commit acts of terrible violence. And they've done it in the name of Christianity as well. Christians through church history have done evil things in the name of Christianity. But the difference between Islam and Christianity on that level is that the indictment against the church for its evil comes directly from Jesus himself. In other words, when people say, well, Christianity has perpetrated evil,
Yeah.
I agree.
And, and Jesus condemned it.
And how do we know it's evil? Jesus is the one who says it's evil. Just read what he says.
Yeah.
And then you realize, oh, then I should listen to Jesus.
Right. Duh.
Yes, yes. So you don't throw out
Yeah.
religion based on the fact that people do evil things. What you do is you say, well, which religion most promotes real peace between people? Which religion has a suffering God who died for his enemies, who brings healing, who solves the real guilt of sin? And to me, there's no comparison between Christianity and Islam.
Okay. We had a caller call in, and I think we defined this earlier, but to reiterate, they wanted to know how you define evil versus sin, but evil is a result of sin.
Yeah, evil is a result of sin. The term evil in the Bible is used about 500 times, and the term sin is used, and there's different terms that are translated into English, but about 450 times. So evil, the term evil, ra in the Old Testament, means calamity, pain, absence of that which is good, usually put in contrast to good. It'll say good or evil. So anything that's not good, that's evil. And it's always personally experienced. It's existential. It's something you feel, something you experience, loss, pain, death, all that. That's evil. Sin, on the other hand, is a condition in which a person has decided not to think like God. Sin begins...
By the way, that happens every day, doesn't it?
Oh, yes, which is why we need to be saved by grace. My goodness, you know, I mean... sin is anything that God would not do or say or think if he were in your skin.
Wow.
Well, you can see why, because he's love. He's perfect, just love, the Trinity. And that's at the center of the universe. So sin is the separation from that. It, by definition, must create evil. Evil is inevitable once a human created in God's image ceases to think like her or his creator. The result is moral evil, where human beings treat one another the way we all treat each other. So sin is the source, evil is the result, and the Bible is very clear, uses those terms a total of about 1,000 times all the way through the Bible. And again, back to the gospel is the answer to this. And there's really no other answer on earth except what Jesus did.
Do you think we have lost our sensitivity to sin and therefore we have been desensitized to evil?
I think so. I don't think I think that's a given. In the Western culture especially, that's the one I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
Just in the last 40 years.
Yeah.
Do you remember the movie Midnight Cowboy?
Yeah.
When it first came out, it was rated X.
Wow.
Then it was downgraded about 15 years later to R, and now I think it's PG or PG-13.
Well, there you go.
Now that tells you what's happened since the 60s into our era, and they didn't change the movie.
It's interesting you say that because I've been doing some research for a sermon I'm going to give. So I don't know. You do it every day. I got to do it weeks in advance. But I was reading in 1983. That was the year I took over theDove. Ronald Reagan was president, and that was the year that he declared the year of the Bible.
Ah.
So from 1983 today, 30 years, look what's happened to the United States. And look what we have moved from what was considered an X to a PG, or from what we would consider sin to acceptable.
Yeah, oh yeah, there's no question. And to me, Perry, the moral of that story is, it doesn't matter what politicians say about the Bible. What matters is whether the body of Christ is preaching the gospel effectively in the culture. And I was in the 70s, you were too, you know, the decade of the evangelical, and, you know, when Jimmy Carter was elected, and, you know, people thought the millennium was starting, you know. And
peace, love, and rock and roll.
And of course, it turned out not to be so. The fact is, we live in an age where there's always a kingdom of darkness and a kingdom of light. And Christians are expatriates in this age. I just finished a series in 1 Peter, and he says we are sojourners and aliens in this. We don't have a franchise in this age. We're we are, as Christians, not simply a subculture, but a counterculture within the larger culture. And if we ever think that we really, truly have a long-term home here, then we're going to slip into the way the world thinks. We have to realize whether President Reagan said it was the year of the Bible or not was a little bit immaterial, because look what happened since that time. So we Christians have got to say, you know, I kind of don't care what the news says about it, because the real work of the gospel is always going on behind the scenes in our lives and through our churches and through the various ways that the Holy Spirit works. We've got to keep our mind on that.
How would you view then the church's effectiveness today, because we don't seem to be pushing back evil?
I don't think we are winning the war against evil, if by that you mean creating a truly just society in the world.
I don't think we'll ever create an utopia. I don't think that's scriptural, but what I'm saying is that it seems that the battles that we have engaged in that would fight elements of evil in our culture, we're losing. I mean, we still haven't stopped abortion. I mean, and that's, to me, the number one evil in the world. And I don't want to go political here, but I'm just trying to think, well, wait a minute. If we're to be this counterculture, we're not being taken seriously, or we're not being looked at.
Well, perhaps not. But on the other hand, you go back to the first century church, 1 Peter, for instance. Peter did not tell the Christians, you're here to change your country. He said, you're here to represent a different kingdom. Now, that might change the country, because if a significant number of people are salty within a larger nation, then the entire nation is positively affected. But we, I think, get fixated on changing the world as Christians instead of preaching the gospel and living out the gospel. And Peter said, you are here to bear witness of a king whose excellencies are beyond your wildest imagination. You are a group of people, 1 Peter chapter 2, verses 9 and following. You're a group of people who proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into light. So we're not really, in a sense, here to change the country per se, by force especially, and even by the political ballot box alone. We are here to live as this culture, let that affect how we do our politics, certainly, and be willing to be disagreed with in a pluralistic culture, for sure, and criticized. But it's up to God to change, and you know, really, like you said, there's no utopia. So we have to focus on being the kingdom of Christ within this larger culture.
I guess what I've learned through the battles is, at the end of the day, it's evangelism. And if we can move our attention into evangelism and realize that God has us here to influence somebody around us.
Oh, yes.
I mean, we're to become spiritually reproductive.
Absolutely.
And so that would be the number one goal.
Absolutely.
Rick, you're a delight. Thanks. Come
Thanks,
back more
Perry.
often.
Hey, man.
We got to get you out of the woods into the big city here.
Absolutely.
Pastor Rick Booye, Trail Christian Fellowship out there in Trail, beautiful facility, and your services are when?
10 o'clock on Sunday mornings.
All right. And if you haven't got a good church, there's a good pastor. All right. Thanks for coming in. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Daniel and I work at theDove TV. You know, compared to Portland, Seattle, and LA, Medford might be considered a small market, but at theDove, we're excited about the opportunity to make a big impact right here in our community. And you help make that happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us now by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or by phoning 541-776-5368.
Okay, we're we're back, and our guest right now is a very special guest who's authored a book called One Question. Yes, life-changing answers from today's leading voices. Delighted to have with us Ken Coleman. He is a commentator, has his own show, The Ken Coleman Show. And Ken, nice to have you. Where are we Skyping you in from?
We are in the Atlanta suburbs, just northeast of Atlanta.
Well, nice to have you with us today. Thanks for giving us some of your time. You know, and I understand that this book is a culmination of all the interviews you do. Now that I'm interviewing you, someday you can interview me.
Right, right.
And so that's how you came about with this book, from all the people you've talked to through the years?
Well, it was the genesis of the idea. I was doing some yard work one day. I don't know about you, but that's where I get a lot of great clarity, when I can do some monotonous work and let my brain kind of run. And, you know, I'm one of the MCs of the Catalyst Conference, the nation's largest evangelical leadership conference. Yeah. And I get to interview a lot of people. I host the podcast as well. And so I was doing yard work one day and simply came up, I believe God gave me the idea to create a concept, an audio blog called One Question with Ken Coleman. And I simply cut out what I thought were the best one question and one answers from some of the top interviews that I had been able to do. And it went kind of viral. And it was about a 3-minute product or less. And out of that was approached about turning it into a book concept. And so for the book specifically, before I ever chose a guest, I spent a couple days down here in this basement office just thinking through life's biggest questions or life's biggest answers that we need, right? Topics. Yeah. I divided it into 3 sections: succeeding, surviving, and sustaining. And out of that, I began to develop all the big questions. So, for instance, in succeeding, we're talking about niche with John Maxwell, or we're talking about vision with T.D. Jakes, you know, or you just picked it. I mean, we have an unbelievable list of business authors, the best business authors of the last decade. And so, you know, we're asking about hard work with Malcolm Gladwell. How do we chase personal greatness with Jim Collins, as an example? Right. And so that's how I came up with the book. And after I determined the topics, the questions, then I went out and sought after people that I thought could answer it best. And some of them I had already interviewed, some I had not. Well, by the way, tell Gabe you and I talked, okay? I know Gabe pretty well. Okay, great. Okay. Well, listen, let's talk about a few of these. I understand one of them was former President Jimmy Carter, and he suggests how we should maybe accept life changes. What were your thoughts on that interview? Yeah, you know, I specifically wanted him first for the topic, which was reinvention. I think that one of the areas in life that many of us get tripped up is when seasons change. And as those seasons change, obviously circumstances change, and we have to change along with it. Now, I don't suggest that we have to change our beliefs or our principles, but we do have to be able to adapt. And here's a man that, whether you agree with his politics or not, he left the presidency under a cloud of disappointment, let's just put it that way. And yet he didn't just go hit the rubber chicken circuit and cash in on being president. He dug deep and got involved with Habitat for Humanity, and then became an ambassador for peace, won the Nobel Peace Prize. And so, again, I thought he was a great example of a man who reached the pinnacle of his career and yet didn't have great success and had to kind of change. What do you do when you're president of the United States and you're out of office and you still have plenty of life to live? Right. And I set a great example for all of us in accepting change, but reinventing ourselves with that season of change and continuing to make a difference. What a tremendous lesson. John McCain, you talked to him about finding courage when he had no freedom. Yeah, again, when I came to the idea of conviction and courage, I looked up him because he was my first choice, Senator John McCain. And he had a quote from years ago about how conviction is really the fuel that gives us the ability to have courage when we need it most. And so he tells the story in this particular chapter, one of my favorite chapters. He tells the story of being obviously in the prison in Ho Chi Minh City, and he gets the opportunity to go home if he recants his belief in the United States and says, hey, we were wrong and I committed all these war crimes, which he didn't commit. And he at one point says to the guards, there's no way I'm going to do this. And they said, but you won't, no one will know your name. And he said, but I will know. I will know. And he said, so that lesson is what I'd give to every young person. When the temptations of life come, make sure that you understand that when no one else may know, you will actually know. And, you know, going back a step, John Maxwell is a mentor of mine. He's also in the book. He says this all the time, and he's right. He said, you know, you've got to make the big decisions in life very early on, and then spend the rest of your life managing those decisions. And that speaks to the conviction that John McCain is talking about. And once we make the big decisions early, when the opportunities come for us to be tempted, or the opportunities come where we need to step up and have courage, if we've made the decision early on, then courage comes because we do what we believe. It's too late to have courage if you don't believe in something.
Wow, good stuff. Again, the name of the book is called One Question, Life-Changing Answers from today's leading voices, Ken Coleman, and he's a talk show host. It's put out by Howard Books. I would assume you could find it at the Christian bookstores as well as online. And let me encourage you to get a copy at Howard Books as the publisher. Again, One Question. There's a lot of other personalities I want to get to when we have time here, but did you find a faith common thread through these interviews?
Well, it's an interesting question. Let me just say real quick to your listeners, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted people to grasp the timeless wisdom in this book. And each chapter is 4 pages long. And I did that on purpose because I wanted a book that was easy to read, but that gave you the beef right off the bat. And I want to tell your listeners, if they go to onequestionbook.com, onequestionbook.com, I've got 3 free chapters up there, no strings attached. They don't have to give me an email address, nothing. They just click on them. And it features Mark Burnett, who created The Voice, Lou Holtz, the legendary Notre Dame coach, and Marcus Buckingham, the strengths expert. So I just wanted to let your audience know it's totally free. Go kick the tires.
All right, good. Thanks.
To your question, no, this is not a faith-based book. And in fact, really the only personalities in the faith world that are featured in the book would be T.D. Jakes and Andy Stanley. I asked T.D. Jakes about vision casting, and then I asked Andy Stanley about the now. You know, so many of us that are wired for ambition, we understand this temptation. I struggle with it big time. And the temptation is to always be thinking about what's next, what's next, what's next. And I have learned in my own life, and I think this is true of so many of your listeners today, is that if we obsess about what's next, we'll miss what God has for us in the now, and ultimately and sadly sacrifice the next. And it's a huge, huge temptation for all of us. And I think we have to say, hey, God's got me right here, right now, and I'm here on purpose. And it's okay to have an eye on the next, but not to obsess, because we need to be asking these questions. Who does God have me to serve now? Who am I supposed to love now? Who am I supposed to learn from now? Who am I supposed to pour into now? What are those questions in your life that you need to be asking about the now? And so there's not a huge faith component, so therefore there's really not a huge tie-in there. I think the tie-in is I'm highlighting the power of a great question. I say in the book that good questions inform, but great questions transform. And is there not a better example of transformational question asking than Jesus himself?
Wow. Well said. I find it interesting that you chose Andy Stanley to talk about the now. I really enjoyed his book called Visioneering, which was, visioning into the future.
Well, and the gist, though, the reason I asked him is because Andy, as a leader, has done a marvelous job of making sure that he focuses on what he's supposed to be doing. And so he gives 5 questions in that chapter that he asks himself when opportunities come his way. And again, it speaks back to this point I just made. And I'll give you the 5th question. We'll save the other 4 for those who go buy the book.
Okay.
But the question he always asks himself when he gets an opportunity, Perry, is this: why am I doing what I'm doing? Why am I doing what I'm doing? And if the opportunity that's being presented to me doesn't fit within that major question, then I have to say no to it. One of my mentors from afar, I never got a chance to meet him. His son, Tom Ziglar, is in the book. But Zig Ziglar is someone I admire greatly. He once said, we've got to figure out a way to say no to the good so we can say yes to the best. And I think that's the core issue there.
How has this changed you? It appears to me, Ken, that you did this at a critical, if not a decision or a crossroad times of your life.
There's no question. I'm right now in the transition from my day job to my dream job, which is the radio show. We have some television opportunities that are beginning to present. I'm writing, I'm speaking, obviously. And I learned so much. I'll tell you honestly, the book features 34, as you know, unique one-question interviews. So it's 34 different questions, 34 major topics, 34 great voices that give us wisdom. And every chapter I learned something. I mean, I could not help it. In fact, that's why I wanted to write a book like this. I wanted to bring the reader with me and give them a upfront front row seat, right? Or step behind the velvet rope. And because I do get this blessing of interviewing some of the great minds in our world, and I learned so much. I got to tell you, I mean, I could go chapter by chapter by chapter and tell you what I've learned. I'll tell you the biggest takeaway from the book, the Jim Collins chapter. Of course, Jim Collins is probably the most respected business voice on great companies, obviously the author of Good to Great. And I asked him a question. I said, what is the reason why we don't pursue personal greatness? So many of us don't go after personal greatness, yet we want a great vacation, we want a great restaurant, so forth and so on. He basically said, we're not risk averse, we're ambiguity averse, and that's why we don't chase greatness. He said most of us would rather live a life of paint by numbers, what we think is safe, what we think we know is coming around the corner, instead of taking a blank canvas and painting our own masterpiece.
Boy, that's powerful. Good stuff. Ken, thanks for your time. Have you back. I enjoyed this, and I'm going to look forward to finishing the book and call you back and go through some more of these interviews that you had, and keep up the good work. Let's stay in touch. Say hi to Gabe. He'll tell you all about me when you talk to him, and I'll tell him all about you that when we interviewed you.
Hey, appreciate you being on. I appreciate it.
All right, God bless you. Have a good day. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Paula, and I work at theDove TV. Every day we get letters and emails from people who've been encouraged, blessed, and challenged by the programs on theDove TV. But we couldn't do it without you. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to bring inspiration and hope to our community by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us, or call us at 541-776-5368.
Well, my next guest, perhaps you've watched him play baseball. John Rocker's with us today, Major League Baseball pitcher for the Atlanta Braves and the author of Scars and Striker. And when he got out of baseball, he went into a very successful career in real estate development, but now he's working with veterans, and I think you're going to find our time together to be pretty fascinating. Hi, John. How you doing today?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing today?
Good. Thanks, man. Are you in Atlanta?
I am. Actually, I'm at a meeting right now with a company. I just had to step out, a company called Blue Stream, big cell tower mechanics, I guess, if you will. They're nationwide. Have an initiative. They want to hire 1,000 veterans by the end of the year. So I'm actually meeting with them right now. I've been there about 45 minutes to an hour, talking about how they can hire some of the veterans in the program.
Well, good for you. Just a quick question. How'd you go from baseball to real estate to helping vets? Just jack of all trades, I guess. No, actually, when I was playing ball, just the crowd I ran with, in my civilian life, I guess, away from baseball, were all real estate guys. I had a dear friend of mine growing up that got into real estate. His father had been a big-time commercial developer and whatnot. And when I was still playing, maybe my second year in the league, I think, we bought a shopping center together down in St. Simons Island, Georgia. And really, before I retired, I bought a decent portfolio of real estate. And then, just sitting around the off seasons and things like that with these individuals and just picking their brain, I just kind of got interested in it. And actually, when I got hurt in 2003, and I spent basically 2 years on the disabled list, still trying to come back and play, rehabbing and things like that. Actually, my first real estate development while I was technically still playing up in Dalton, Georgia, a little 70-lot dirt deal up there. And then, when I rehabbed for those 2 years, and I came back and realized the shoulder just, the old gray mayor just wasn't what she used to be, and I just, wasn't any good anymore. I hung it up, retired, and literally went home from the ballpark one night and just woke up the next morning and just kept on doing what I've been doing the last several years with managing my properties and creating new deals and things like that, and just off I went. Well, tell us about Save Homeless Veterans Organization. What is it you guys do?
It's a 501c3, not-for-profit, based here in Atlanta for right now. Would love to take it regionally and hopefully nationally at some point. It's basically a program. The foundation of the program, obviously, Save Homeless Veterans, is you're looking to take men and women who serve this country who've ended up on the wrong side of life and ended up homeless, to bring them in off the street, and we provide nice housing for them. general footprint for our homes. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, 3 bedroom, 2 baths. Generally buy our properties off audio, bank books, their foreclosures, and we fully rehab them. One we just put in place about 2-3 months ago. 10-foot ceilings, granite countertops, hardwood floors, brand new appliances. I mean, we put these men and women in nice places. And the whole theory is I'm not going to have a man or woman at fault in my stead living somewhere that I wouldn't be proud to live in. So all the properties we put them in, some clown approached me about 2 months ago, said he had a portfolio of Section 8. I was this close to punching right in his mouth.
Wow.
I wouldn't live in Section 8, and by God, somebody at fault in my stead that have that much respect for it, they're not going to live in Section 8 either. Not to disparage those people, but military veterans, especially the men and women in my program, deserve better than that.
You know,
it goes, and sorry to interrupt you, but it goes way past that. It's a fully comprehensive effort to basically rehabilitate the lives of these men and women. The 3 basic areas that cause these men and women to become homeless: physical irresponsibility, psychiatric issues, and chemical dependency. And within the program, while you're living, in one of our homes within the program, we've got counselors, PhD mentors, and psychiatrists, psychologists, all kinds of affiliations all over the city to deal with your post-traumatic stress disorder, deal with your alcohol issue, your drug issue. We've got a group we're partnered up with called the Optimum Financial Institute. Dear friend of mine, Ryan Mack. You can see Ryan on CNN all the time as a financial analyst. Right. He's a Wall Street guy. He started a 501c3 called Optimum Financial Institute that teaches financial literacy, that teach these folks after we get them a job through the program and they start making money, how to budget their money, clean their credit up, properly fill out job applications, start savings accounts, all those kind of things. We basically try to address all the issues by which a man or woman becomes homeless and create that foundation. And so when they're done with the program, they can go out and afford their own place. They've got all the faculties in place, at that point in time, to never experience homelessness again.
Well, first of all, how can people get a hold of you or learn more about it if they want to support what you're doing? Do you have a website?
We do, SaveHomelessVeterans.org.
Okay. SaveHomelessVeterans.org. I think, John, what we don't realize, it's hard for me, and I've had some guests in the past here that have talked about this. It's hard for us to get our heads around that we have these people that went out and gave their all for us and fought for this country and are homeless. I mean, they're homeless. I mean, I know some that are living in their cars. How big is this problem?
And I actually didn't know this. I was involved in working with the homeless community, just the civilian, if you will, homeless community here in Atlanta,
right.
With a dear friend of mine, and we just were literally having a heart-to-heart talk about 2 years ago, and he addresses one issue that he was telling me the story that he had just become aware of, working with the civilian homeless community, was the veteran homeless community. He's like, John, I had no idea what a problem it was. And he starts telling me the numbers. And, I mean, you could have knocked me out of that chair with a feather when he starts telling me that in the metro Atlanta area, there's 2,600 homeless veterans the VA knows about. There's probably about 4,000 or 5,000 in reality. Nationwide, on any given night, a man or a woman that fought in our stead to, A, keep us safe, but B, to spread liberty and democracy around the globe, which I think is a stalwart commitment of the United States, what we should be doing. Those men and women that did that on our behalf, 300,000 nationwide. Wow. Don't know where their next meal is coming from. Don't know where they're sleeping the next night. And it's an absolute, call it a tragedy. It is what it is. It's an absolute tragedy. And when my friend Rocky told me about that, I look at him and I'm like, Rock, I appreciate what you do with the civilian homeless. We've got to do something to help these men and women. That's kind of how Save Homeless Veterans was born. But it's not just, there are groups out there. You're homeless. Here's the keys. Yeah, good luck to you. It's that comprehensive program. These men and women don't become homeless by accident. There is a reason they became homeless.
Right.
And like I said, those 3 reasons generally boil down to physical irresponsibility, psychiatric problems, or chemical dependency problems. So as we're giving you a place to live, we're rehabilitating any of those issues that you may have. So hopefully in a 12-month period of time, kind of like a baby bird leaving the nest, off you go, out to live a productive, happy life that God intended you to.
John, are you finding that corporate America is opening their thinking to hiring vets? You're right now, as we're talking today.
That's the reason I'm meeting with this Blue Stream company today. I'm meeting with a guy named Chuck West here at Blue Stream. He's one of their regional managers. And like I said, they have contracts with Verizon and T-Mobile. They fix and adjust cell towers, and they're nationwide. They're a big company. They have an initiative to employ 1,000 veterans by the end of the year. And when I saw that, I saw their piece on Fox News local affiliate Fox News here in Atlanta about 2 weeks ago, and I called up one of our volunteers and like, get me a meeting with that guy. And sure enough, 10 days later, here we are, and my partner's still inside talking to him. But yeah, I mean, we will start absolutely referring our men and women over here to get them employment. And one thing that we found, obviously, you're in the military, you're a bad A if you want to call it that, and things are going well for you. I can't imagine how much pride and how big your ego must be if you're a trained, hardened, trained to kill you with your bare hands military kind of guy, and you come out and for whatever reason or another you end up homeless. You can't put food on your own table. You can't pay your bills. You can't take care of your family. And what that must do to someone's ego, to someone's pride they have in themselves. Mm-hmm. So when you come in our program, a big part of the program is to employ you, is to get you a job. We're affiliated also with a group called Select Source, a staffing company. That they found jobs for a few of our men and women already. But just that whole, I'm back at work, I'm getting a paycheck. I can, if I want to take a friend out to dinner, I can actually do that. And that's got to do a lot to start repairing that damaged pride, that damaged ego. And it seems to be working pretty well so far. So I'm actually sitting here, like I said, meeting with Blue Stream. Just to start, putting them on our referral list. All right,
let me say to our viewers and listeners, SaveHomelessVeterans.org is the website, and you can go there and learn more about it and find out what he's doing and maybe even get involved in it. John, what few moments I have left, what are you asking the faith community to do to help you or other organizations like you?
The biggest thing, obviously, us being a not-for-profit, we survive solely off donations. And whether it's $5, $20, whatever, it all makes a difference. When these men and women come in our program, they literally, and there's a few minor exceptions, but literally there's been guys who have come in that literally did not have a dime in their pocket. They had no money, had nothing. They had a suitcase with 4 or 5 shirts, a couple pair of jeans, and a pair of shoes on their feet, and that's all they have in this world. And it usually takes to get them through the intake process, where you kind of let them decompress and settle down and get used to their surroundings. And we send you over to Roddle Street Baptist Church here in Atlanta, in Marietta, Georgia, is where all our counseling and stuff takes place, all our faith-based stuff takes place.
Good.
It takes 4 or 5 days to kind of get them in, find out what kind of issues they have. Do you have any chemical dependencies? Do you have what are your psychiatric issues? All that kind of stuff. To start prescribing what kind of treatment they need to begin their rehabilitation process. And then once that happens, the job application happens and all that kind of stuff. It takes about 45 to 60 days for these men and women to become employed. Most times they don't have VA benefits because it's kind of funny. If you don't have an address, it's kind of hard to get a benefit check. Mm-hmm. So we take them down to the VA. We get their benefits reinstated. But that whole process takes between 30 and 60 days. Wow. And during that period of time, they showed up with not a dime in their pocket.
Wow.
So how do they get? So we generally will give them, each man, each woman, we'll give them a couple $100 a week to, maybe a little spending money, maybe some grocery money, but buy some hygiene products and things like that. And those monies come from donation dollars. Right. Until that man or woman can kind of start climbing that ladder and back up to the top and get employed and start getting some benefit money from the VA and stuff like that. There is a
I'm out of time here. Yeah, I'm out of time here, John. But again, let me just encourage people, check it out, and you can go to SaveHomelessVeterans.org. John, thanks for what you're doing. God bless you, my friend. Let's stay in touch.
Hi, I'm Jim, and I work at theDove TV. Every weekday between 6 and 8 a.m., our award-winning news and sports team bring you the best morning show around. It's live, it's honest, and it's a whole lot of fun. And you help make it happen. Did you know that more than 90% of our income comes from people like you? You can help us continue to air local programs that share your voice by making a secure online donation at our website, thedove.us.